I think we will go ahead
You're
and,
spending change the reorg date, you're spending money.
It's not costing you money.
are you boys done?
Maybe.
Yeah, go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. We will have first order of business, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cardenas?
Present.
Councilmember Jackson?
Here.
Councilmember Silva?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Garcia?
Present.
And Mayor Villegas Walker.
Here. If you could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Mr. Jackson, and remain standing, please, for the invocation.
Please join me. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing, bow your heads. Heavenly Father, as we enter into this season of Thanksgiving, pray for a spirit of gratitude, that we will always have Thanksgiving in our hearts, that we will remember those that are less fortunate, and every day be mindful of our bountiful blessings. Please help us to be mindful of the work to be done by this council. Help us to make wise and intelligent and informed decisions that best serve our community. Be with those this holiday season that are finding it particularly difficult to find something to be thankful for. We pray your blessings upon those who have lost so much in the recent fires and in the shootings and in the tragedies that have been around us. But please help us to be mindful of those things that also bring people joy, and to focus on those things that are uplifting to you. These things we pray in thy precious name, amen.
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 All righty, we will now have a report out by our city attorney. The city council did meet in closed session from 11:30 to approximately 1:30 this afternoon.
And there's nothing to report, Madam Mayor.
That's a good 2 hours and nothing to report, but it was time well spent. Let me assure you that. I want to go back and remind everyone that this is a public meeting. If there is an item on the agenda on which you wish to be heard, oh, my screen just moved, sorry. You're asked to complete a blue speaker slip, which is in the back, and submit it to our city clerk prior to the start of the meeting. Persons wishing to address the council, successor agency to the RDA, and successor housing agency are not required to identify themselves. However, this information assists the mayor in ensuring that all persons wishing to address the council are recognized, and also assists the city clerk in preparing the city council meeting minutes. When the item is announced and your name is called by the mayor, please step to the podium and state your name for the record. Unless your time is extended, there is a 3-minute time limit for each public presentation. If you wish to address the council, successor agency to the RDA, and successor housing agency concerning any matter not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment portion of the agenda. Please be reminded that any information provided on the speaker slip is voluntary and will be a public record. At this point, I have no public speaker slips, so we will move on to our scheduled public comments. The Chamber of Commerce report has been deferred to next month. We will have a presentation by Adriana Nava, our Community Services Director, regarding recreational programming and budgeting. That will be followed by brief reports by our Police Chief, Chief Johnson, with an update with regard to the border situation, as well as our Fire Chief with regard to wildfires. All right, Ms. Nava. And this is so timely because the woman that had come to the council meeting inquiring just sent me an email saying, hey, what's up?
So I was hoping that somebody with really positive news was going to be before me before I came in for this one. So this is an update to our recreational programming, and as Mayor Walker mentioned, the Half Pint program was closed after a month of being open. We looked at personnel costs, and it was the program that was, I guess, the lowest hanging fruit, lowest enrollment, lowest participation from the children and the parents. So, as mentioned before, our division, the Parks and Recreation Division, strives to provide quality indoor and outdoor opportunities. We do have a lot of programs that provide constructive leisure educational classes, and then we also provide the classes to a variety of age groups. So this presentation that follows is the fall recreational programs. Previously, I had presented on the summer programs, and I didn't really include any budget figures or anything like that. This presentation is for the fall programs and includes some figures. So as mentioned last time, one of our programs, probably our most popular program with children and families, is the Stepping Stones program. This program is typically a parent and either one child or two children. We charge $35 for family for this program. And so we just kind of ran numbers as to how many recreation leaders it takes to run this program, as well as the number of participants. These range 60 children, 70 parents per month, so this is a pretty full. We host it at the community center, and so this is a very packed event that, you know, we have a great turnout. The issue you will see is that the cost, and these numbers are actually a little less than what our actual cost is. The actual cost is about 20% greater with fringe benefits. So you'll see that we charge $35 per family per month, and our total to run this program is $37,440. So you'll see we have a shortfall for this program.
What would it cost per family to be revenue neutral?
About $65 to $70.
Okay, $65 to $70
It'd be more than
per
that.
month.
It'd be more than that because $70 would generate 29.6, and you're trying to get to 37, so you're probably looking more like 85.
So that's when you'll run into, you know, our family's willing to pay $80 for a program. The
Okay,
other
well,
thing that we've considered.
Here's the
Sorry,
thing.
go ahead.
What I'm hearing is we would rather have the programs available and see who can afford to pay, rather than canceling the program altogether because we have people that can't pay, or actually, the woman that we've been corresponding with, she's willing to pay. It's just the program is canceled, right?
So in this case, and so she's in a different program, the Half Pint program.
Right.
But it's similar situation. So if we increase prices, we can see who is, you know, available to pay.
Yeah,
But I
let's-
want to let you guys know of what we're currently charging, what we're providing, and the number of
Okay,
participants.
so let's talk about this. If it's $80 per month, the program is available how many days per week?
One of them is 3 days per week, and then the other one is 2 days, but the number of hours is the same. So for the little ones, they have a 0 to 2, their class is an hour, and the older kids is an hour and a half. So we can work out the numbers, but I just want to give you guys a glimpse.
Yeah, because I think what's going to ultimately, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but what I really would love to see happen with these programs is the value that they bring to the families at an extraordinarily reasonable cost, right?
It's still very affordable. I mean, I think
Yeah.
a lot of parents would still continue to come. I think it's just a matter of us coming to you, making sure that we tell the council in anticipation of any parent saying, hey, we increased the price a lot, and we catch, you know, everybody off guard.
Okay, but again, I think that if the response is we either raise the price or we can't have the program, what are people going to say? I would rather have the program available, especially if they're families without other options and are looking at, you know, much more expensive options.
Yes.
So, okay.
So this one includes the parent FY, just want to make
Right.
sure it's not.
Can I ask a question? So on the, I was just kind of trying to do the math in my head. So under staff hours, we're saying 3 recreation leaders, each of them works 30 hours per week?
No.
No.
It's total of 90 hours combined.
For the entire program?
No, so per week, they each work 6 hours per day, and there's 3 of them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So this program, they're busy in this particular program only 6 hours a day?
Yes, so they use the other time that they're not in with the children for prep time. Because some of these, they involve a lot of cutting, just getting the sets ready. Every single week, they have a theme. So one week will be law enforcement. So they coordinate with our police department. They bring an officer out. They bring, the dog. There's a lot of coordination that goes on. So the rest of the time when they're not in the program, they're preparing.
So can I go back
Oh,
to
sorry,
that? What, is there a possibility of increasing the number of participants? Because that would be one way to keep the costs lower, or are we required to have 3 recreation leaders per 20 kids or something?
No, we could also increase the number of children. We've tried to keep the ratio of 3 recreation leaders because the children and the parents, a lot of the times the parents speak to one another, and so they need to attend to the children. So there's a lot of refocusing of parents and children because they are 0 to 5. So they're not, school-age children that can already sit and be focused.
Okay.
So this is one of them, actually, you'll see him. He's, and this was part of the Public Safety Week. So you'll see they're pretty small.
Have we thought about maybe private companies sponsoring, to offset some of the costs?
So the sponsorships, we already do a lot of sponsorships citywide. We do it for our employee events. We do it for special events. For the adult center, we sometimes go out for events they're having. So going out for sponsorships is something that becomes a little bit difficult because we are a small community and we're repeatedly going after the same individuals. So it's something that we can strive to do, but it does.
Adrian, if I may, and it's just a suggestion, and I believe we've already been awarded, but the first 5 mini grant, the grant cycle is going to open up first of the year. So they have the major grant, which is up to $200,000 for 0 to 5. I know the back end narrative part is pretty intense, but this would fall perfect, and it's a 2-year grant award. And 0 to 5, I believe City of El Centro has already been funded, so that they have that grant, and then they have the mini grant, which is up to $25,000. So I'm hoping they can at least put the letter of intent in.
It's my understanding that these programs originated, and I could be wrong, but it was my understanding they originally started with those grants.
Yeah.
And when the grant expired, and I don't know if we didn't get awarded or we didn't reapply, that we continued the program, the city, but we will apply once they
Good.
open up again. So just want to give you guys what the situation we're in now.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so Adriana, so help me out here. If we have number of participants, 70 parents, right? So let's just say that's 70 families per month?
No, it's because we have sometimes husband and wife that both
Okay.
come with their child.
Okay,
So that's why we have 60 children, about 70 parents.
okay, because if I'm doing the math and looking at, all right, so that would change this, but, 70 families per month at $35, that revenue you're bringing in is almost $2,500 per month. So it's a lot more than the 14,000 that's here. So something's not right.
It's probably more like 50, because some of them have 2 kids, right?
Yeah, and it's per family.
Per family, so there's probably
Yeah.
more like 50.
So we don't always count, if it's per family, we don't count. And we've also thought of like, hey, what if we just charge per child? But some of them are very little. There may be one child will be 6 months and the other one will be 2.
50
So
times
just-
35 would be 1750.
Okay, but.
Okay, this is
seven-
only one, okay, so then we have
Right,
a whole.
right,
And Adrian, Ms. Nava, is now the evaluation of the registration fees for our programs, is
Depends
that
how
part
many
of also our
months
fee
we
study
done
that
this.
we're currently
Yes,
doing?
this
So
was included
was
as the fee study.
October, November, December.
So Mayor, if I
January,
may,
February.
you will, as part of, the city's doing a citywide fee study, so you will see what the cost, I guess the true costs are for the delivery of these programs. And so as part of that, you will see what, in fact, we should be charging. Of course, at the end, it's going to depend, on the council as to what,
Yeah.
those registration fees are going to be. But that is coming,
Yeah.
so we will be presenting to you in the future, the results of that fee
Yeah.
study.
But I think we really want to back into the actual cost to cover, because this is a little confusing. If we have,
Yeah. How many months do we do this program?
It's from September to May, this is what and then we start again during the summer, for the summer program.
So it's 9 months. So 1750 times 9 months, it generates 15,750. So it's closer to what they had. And maybe it's a little less than 50. You might have more than.
And this is a very conservative number as to the total because it doesn't include supplies. This is just personnel costs, and it doesn't even include the 20% markup for
Not fully
fringe.
burdened either.
Yeah, so it's, we try, so this is the first one. So for half pint, it was similar, $35 per child per month, 18 children, and then this one, because of scheduling, took 4 recreation leaders. So our recreation leaders, a lot of the time, are students, and so their hours don't always work with the schedule that we have. So sometimes it takes 2 recreation leaders rather than 1 alone to make up the hours that it takes for the job. So for this one, the total and then the shortfall is also pretty significant. And this one also as well does not include the fringe benefits, which is an additional 20% markup. So you'll see, yeah, told you it's a bummer that I was the first one.
Well, no, I'm not getting discouraged about what you're showing us. What I'm getting discouraged about is how it is that we have this kind of shortfall. And, I mean, the last one you just showed us
Yeah,
was, how many kids? Was 18 kids?
Yes.
And 4 recreation leaders? It sounds like we need to do a much better job with allocation of hours.
People, yeah. So, okay, that's the other
I
one.
mean, that's crazy.
Yes. And
That's a
so
1 to 4
they're getting
ratio.
they're getting less hours, the recreation leaders,
Mm-hmm.
but still, I think it's pretty personnel
But it
heavy.
doesn't really matter how many recreational leaders it is, it's the staff hours.
It's the hours, yeah.
So regardless if it
based
was
on staff
1 person
hours.
doing 54 hours
Yeah.
or 4 doing 54 hours, it's still 54 hours.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
no, what's the ratio of participants to staff?
3, usually it's for every 6 children, there's 1 staff member. So even though there was 4 rec leaders, there was only 3 rec leaders at any given point with the children because the other rec leader was in school or whatnot.
Okay, so,
Does that make sense?
yes, so when you come back with this presentation the next time for us, could you give us the staff to child ratio,
Yeah, so
That
it's
would help.
1 staff person for every 6 children.
including for for the other program?
For the other one, it's, if you include parents, the ratio goes up. Because we're not taking care of parents, but we're also making sure that parents stay focused.
Right. So, again, for us to kind
Yeah,
of
we
get
can
the
give you ratios.
full picture, especially because the number of staff to participants varies by the program?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does, yeah. So the next program is the Kids Program. This is a program at the MLK Pavilion. And so the registration fee for this program is $30 per child. And it's about 20 children, and they're at capacity most of the time for this program. It's a very popular program. And I did ask the staff, I said, well, if there's a program, there's an ACES program that is free, what incentivizes parents to pay $30 per month for this program? And one of the staff persons told me, well, we teach children life lessons, how to comb your hair, how to keep yourself groomed. These are things that they don't help you with at the ACES program. And I said, okay, so it brings into perspective the things that we offer and why parents decide to enroll children in the programs that we offer. So it is a great program. The offset on this one is also pretty high, and the revenue is also pretty low.
Adriana, I'm sorry, could you go back one?
Yeah.
Is this also a 9-month program?
Well, this program was cut,
But it was a 9-month program?
yes, as well.
Okay,
And it was also started with a grant.
okay, so it wouldn't be, the revenue generation wouldn't be 630, it would be 5670, because you just did that by 1 month,
35 times 18.
is 630.
Oh, God, I don't know. Yeah, so yeah, that's the revenue, 630. And so the difference was what we spent on labor.
Yeah, but you have that for the whole 9 months, right? That 15,336 is for the 9-month program?
Oh, yeah, sorry, that was, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you gotta take the
Yes.
630 and multiply it
Yes.
by 9 also.
Sorry.
So it's still bad, but it's not as
Yes.
bad.
Yeah,
It's about $9,000 shortfall
Yes,
in that program.
yes.
Okay.
so,
Madam Mayor, are you just kind of trying to trying to bring back the program in January, or are we just trying to set up for trying to bring it back in September, or what
Trying
would?
to keep my head from exploding. When I'm
Okay.
looking at.
That's good, because I'm sitting next to you. so
Yeah,
it's fine.
because, no, we need to revitalize these programs and figure out from a data-driven standpoint how much they cost, how many participants, and the number of recreation leaders that make sense, how to best allocate that talent so that we can get more kids to participate and enrich the number of programs or grow the number of programs that we're offering. If we figure out that there is a true divide where someone cannot afford $30 for a month, then let's figure out how to address
Right.
that. But we know that there's a boatload of parents out there that can afford the $30 per month and a heck of a lot more. So what I want to get back to is how do we grow the programs rather than cut the programs and getting to a point ideally where they're revenue neutral.
So, Adrian, a question on, let's say, we'll take the kids program, for instance. How many, it's 55 hours per week, but that's staff time. So how many hours per week is actual participation time with the children?
I believe it is from, gosh, I think it might be 2 hours per day, Marcella, I don't know if you
About
remember.
three, maybe
About three, yeah, 2 to 3.
3.5 hours.
And it's 5 days a week or 3 days a week?
Kids is
Four?
4 days, because it's homework assistance program.
Okay,
So it's
so-
Monday.
It's a
through
homework
Thursday.
center.
So call 4 hours or 4 days a week at 3 hours, that's 12 hours a week. You know, so you're talking 24, 48
48
hours a month, and you're paying $30 a child. I know, budgets are tight for people, but I gotta tell you, I think, there's a lot of people that are gonna pay, I mean, you're not even talking 50 cents or 75 cents on the dollar, on the hour.
And I will tell you though, and it breaks my heart, but I have to be honest with you guys. I've heard staff, hey, I've helped this family out this month because they can afford the last $5. I mean, this is where it gets a little bit difficult because I do hear the stories. People will email me, my child has special needs, Myra's amazing. I didn't even make the registration, and it's just, I hear the stories from the parents as well, and this is the part of me that this is probably one of the most difficult assignments I've had to date. Looking at the numbers, looking at the children, hearing the stories, it's difficult. If we raise the fees, some people will not be able to make it, so.
Or we
you know.
raise the fees and we expand the program so that we have 40 children whose parents can pay $50 a month, which lowers the cost for those that can't. So then we have a bunch of scholarship kids.
So we could do that, but the place that this is housed at is a pretty small area, if you
Yeah,
saw
but
it.
It's a
you get-
capacity
I think what
issue,
you're,
too.
you're
It's a
kind of
capacity.
hearing what we want to do is
Yeah.
figuring out how to expand.
Also, Irene, I think
Here, I think
minimum
we
wage is scheduled to go up.
And yeah, that's why we
In
cost, the
January.
cost for personnel.
Oh, okay, you're
Yes,
incorporated
for
that.
this, for the next one, yeah, so.
I think that we've had our community sponsors come out for events. And instead of just reaching out for events, maybe we should talk to them about these children's programs, because I can't think of one person that I've talked to about donating money that would say no to something like this, especially when it serves such an underrepresented part of our community. I mean, it's your stories about the staff covering dues. That's something we should definitely be proactive about.
Is there a way for us to go to needs-based registration? If you need assistance with your registration, can we figure out a way to help you cover? If Jason can pay full freight, he should be paying full freight, right?
You
Absolutely.
can pay double.
He can pay double.
But we'll have Stacy give
for
a
you.
more positive presentation right now where there is some funding available, and then maybe we do it by needs-based, and they're in that income category, then we could maybe
I think
provide
it's a great idea.
scholarships.
I mean, my children, they use some of these programs, not these specifically, but during the summer,
Yeah, the
they
summer
use summer
camps.
programs, and you know what? I'd have no problem paying twice as much if I know that those dollars are coming to this.
And I think I agree with what the mayor is saying. I think, first of all, we cannot underestimate the value of this. I can see how these programs provide incredible services to our children that, and the investment is going to pay off later as we develop, our young children with these kind of skill sets and social skills and so on. I do think that, however, I think what the mayor is suggesting is that perhaps expand the opportunities by increasing ratios when that's
Economies of
permitted,
scale, yeah,
economies of
if we-
scale,
yeah,
where
that
that's
makes
allowed.
sense.
I do think, going back to one of the earlier slides, that one for every 6 child is children, that's really good ratio of staff to children. And maybe that's just what we have to do, but that is really rich.
That's why that program's very expensive,
Yeah.
so.
Well, there's also, you got the service clubs, whether it's Kiwanis or Rotary or Seroptimus, Lions, a lot of their core is to help children. And this is kind of in our wheelhouse for a lot of the service clubs that a lot of us are in, or we know people that are in. I think there's a potential there to look for some funding. But in a day and age where, we lost the Boys and Girls Club in El Centro a year and a half ago or so, there's just not a lot of programs out there for children. And we've got to figure out a way to keep what we have and actually, hopefully expand on what we have, because there's nobody else out there that's going to do it. And if we don't figure out a way to make this happen, then the kids aren't going to have anything to do, and then they're going to start getting in trouble and going down the wrong path, where at least this keeps them engaged and hopefully gets them on the right path.
What else do we have?
Okay, so,
Do you have anything good?
flag football actually
Oh,
does
okay.
pretty well.
All right.
So flag football breaks even and, does a little bit more, but a lot of it's used like on the jerseys and the trophies and stuff. But flag football did pretty well. One of our employees, her child is in this program, and she's told me how much she enjoys it herself, just to see them out there. And so this program has done very well, and they do get a lot of participants, and they have a lot of fun. So this program does well. NIPM also has a scholarship, a grant program. So because of these grants, we're able to offset the costs and the recreation leaders, which is what I think
wonderful.
I would love us to do through First Five of California for the Stepping Stones program. I think, if we apply it, but my job right now is to give you realistic and what we're in now, not what we want to do in the future.
Marcel, have we
So-
reached out to Gray or to California Consulting and see about, we keep talking about the low-hanging fruit. This seems to be something that they should be able to help us with. And if we have to pay, $5,000 for a couple months for them to go out and get us $100,000 worth of grant money for these programs, I think it'd be well worth it.
We actually get their grant listing, which,
Yeah, we have been
we
using.
review and see if there's anything that we can qualify for, so we do keep track of that. So, we're constantly, looking for any funding opportunity that we can. And just, as I guess as a reminder, I know that we look at the low, amount for the registration fee, but also keep in mind that these fees have not been looked at for many years. And so I think that's why, we're doing the fee study, so that we can look at it, because they have not been reviewed for a long time. I think the other point, too, that's really important when we're looking to these programs is that we look at how many are actual El Centro resident fees and others that are non-resident, because I think that, I know we've talked about this, that I think we really need to consider, charging a resident and non-resident
Resident,
fee. Other
non-resident.
cities do it, and I think it's time for us to look at that. So as part of, our evaluation going forward is we will present that to you as well.
Yeah, we've got to, I think we have to do that now, because when the pool comes online, I think that's going to be a huge issue of having outside El Centro people taking up the pool area. So we're going to have a different fee schedule.
And so we've implemented the resident and non-resident fee for our adult center, the classes that were subsidized by the city council, by the city for the budget. I believe $5 for city El Centro resident, and then $10 for Zumba for out-of-town resident. So
Is that working?
out-of-town person.
Is that working
So-
out okay?
Yeah, no, I think it's been well received. We haven't had any issues. The documentation has also been easy. We ask for a utility bill that matches with their ID and their name. So it's been working out. Haven't heard any
That's
complaints.
$10 per month,
No, it's every time they go. Yeah.
Per class.
$10 per class.
a monthly class.
Come on.
I can't remember, sorry.
don't
We're going
know,
through so many fees there.
It's a monthly registration that they have for the classes.
Because again, I think one of the things we want to balance out is if we're charging our seniors $10 for 5 hours of activity, and we're charging parents $30 for 60 hours or 40 hours, there's got to be
No, some balance, yeah. And I can't
balance.
remember, sorry, Marcella, I've been looking at you guys in preparation for this, so you'll see more. Okay, so these are the attendance figures for the MLK Junior Pavilion and Conrad Harrison Youth Center. They're combined because when somebody enters, they go through the Conrad Harrison, they pay the fee, and then they can use both facilities. So you'll see here, and the reason why we wanted to show this is because you'll see that on Saturdays, attendance is pretty weak at the facilities. So that also presents an opportunity to decrease costs. During this fiscal year, attendance at the pavilion has been 5,904 persons, which is pretty good. And you'll see July, August, we had a little bit of a slump, but it seems October picked up again.
Why do we think the pavilion is underutilized on Saturdays?
So some of the things I've heard from parents, from the little ones especially, is that it's a big box, but they don't see much to do there. They've given me suggestions, maybe a climbing wall, other activities that you could use that space. We've also considered doing itty-bitty sports for the little ones because it seems that group 0 to 5 is where there's a lot of potential for growth. So that's a program that we wanted to roll out, but after doing this, I was like, let's hold off and see what our fees are. And see how much enrollment we can get. But there's, aside from the little soccer area, if you go there and you're just 1 or 2 kids, maybe 15 minutes of playtime and you're finished. So more activities is what I've heard from some of the people and as part of the research. I don't know if you've heard other things.
Well, I'm not sure I've heard other things, but I've certainly seen other play spaces do things just as simple as having a ginormous area that has nothing but Legos. And so kids can sit and do Legos for as long as they want, or, just a.
That's something that's very easily accomplishable, yeah. We can certainly, I think we already have Legos. It's just a matter of supervising, promoting,
Right,
and getting to it.
exactly. I think getting kids out of the house on Saturdays, especially in the summertime, finding them a
We
place to
have,
be.
on average, about 164 kids that are showing up on Saturdays, so maybe we could have some activities for them. I don't think it's gonna go that much in terms of our fiscal impact if we set up a kickball tournament or something. We have the soccer field right there. Just have to be creative and repurpose things.
This is for the adult center. You can see the participants for October. The adult center is doing pretty well. Over the years, council has increased budget for that building. So we do have a lot of activities. We've also, the seniors have been working really hard to obtain instructors. We've been working with them to make it easier for instructors to come in. We also have Anna there, who's very creative, and she teaches a lot of classes. So they're doing very well, and the budget for this one is on target. So another one is Casa de la Cultura Post Office Pavilion. So we've teamed up with staff from the Consulado and Kimberly Alfaro, who's been spearheading a lot of these classes here. So this is a donation-based classes, and there's multiple courses that are offered. The class size range from 3 to 20 persons. The dance classes have a larger group, whereas some of the drawing classes have a smaller group. This, for the OPOP, we don't obtain any of the revenues that are obtained, but it is enhanced quality of life. Something that residents in El Centro can also participate in. So there's numerous courses, and they seem to enjoy it.
It's open to everybody, though? It's
Yes.
not just El Centro residents?
No, this is, yeah, something for everybody, but because of where it's located, typically it's El
Yeah.
Centro residents that attend these classes.
$20 per month.
Yes,
Okay. And some of these classes are offered just one day a week.
yes.
Is it $20 per month per class? Or you pay $20, you have access to all those
No,
classes?
no, per class.
Okay.
So, oh, sorry. Any other questions on the slide? So, this slide shows our challenges, that we just went through the slides. So you can see, we've currently budgeted about $459,000 for personnel. We also have, the fiscal impact of continuing these recreational activities is estimated at $459,000. We have budgeted approximately $424,000. So we do have a shortfall, and the shortfall didn't include the 20% in fringe benefits. So I've included some options that we can do, or we can also work on other activities, like you said, either increase enrollment for some of these classes and decrease costs, or increase the cost a little bit and keep enrollment the same. So any suggestions, we don't have to take action on it tonight, but I would really appreciate any feedback.
Can I, Adriana, or Ms.
Yeah.
Nava, can I suggest that we keep Volunteer of Americas on the radar? I know that they're gonna be providing state subsidized childcare, 8 to 5, and I believe it's gonna be about 180 slots. So, and that's subsidized, so I'm not sure how the enrollment or the eligibility is gonna work, but that may play into the scholarship opportunities for families that need those enrichment activities, where Volunteer of Americas can provide that. And I'm not sure when they're scheduled to open. I know they're getting pretty close, but they're gonna be chasing kids and families to fill those slots. So maybe that can, provide, or what I don't wanna see is us to supplant what they're doing, and maybe we can just supplement instead of supplant. And that may allow us to kind of justify and make it a revenue neutral rate. But I believe they have about 180 slots, 8 to 5 state childcare, that's gonna run parallel to what we're doing. So those slots could be filled by folks that may need scholarship opportunities.
Don't we also have a community service component it's not ideal to bring in volunteers, but can't we supplement what we're doing with some of the students that have community service obligations or other things like that? None of these options right now, I think, are the direction that we want to go. Close, decrease, reduce. I think we're kind of wanting to go in the opposite direction, which is consistent with what the city manager has proposed, which is let's take a look at our fees that haven't been raised for quite a while. Let's look at increasing enrollment so that those numbers come up, as opposed to, because this is a way for us to eventually decrease and eliminate programs altogether, as opposed to trying to build them up so that they are, again, revenue neutral.
Yes, and I
Right.
want you to be assured that we will also be applying for some grants, like the first 5. The task today, though, was to present what we have on hand, and
Right.
I wanted to be honest.
Well,
Our fees are really low, and personnel costs are high. So in a nutshell, that's what is
Well,
presented.
but, Mayor, I want to say that, in spite of the information was not what we wanted to perhaps see, but I think it's so useful for us to be able to see it and be able to identify the shortfalls that you have brought to us, Adriana. So it's a great presentation, and I appreciate it, and I think it's better that we know the facts as they are, which will allow us to plan for the future.
Well, it's difficult for me to see. I'm like, wow, I'm a complete liability here, So we do bring in some revenues, but the revenues are nowhere near the cost to
Because I think
to
we
run
are
these
not
programs.
value pricing the programs.
Yeah.
We absolutely are not. If we take a look at other jurisdictions and what they're charging for their programs, this is.
I think the
Yeah.
other thing too is your participation suffers because of the low rates. It's kind of like the Planet Fitness membership, $10 a month. We all have it.
And don't use it.
Most of us don't use it, because it's only $10 a month. But if we were paying $60 or $70 a month, we'd either go or we'd cancel, and that's kind of this, it's so low that, the parents go, oh, well, you know what, we won't take our kids this week, maybe we'll take them next week, because it's only $30.
And I'm gonna guarantee my slot by paying that $30 and then tie up that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Even
for
that I
stepping
don't go.
stones, I will say that it's almost, the attendance, 95 to 100. It is very strong. I see the parents are very involved, and I think they'd be willing to pay more. A lot of them would. It's just a matter of, the parents who may not be able to afford to pay those rates, they're gonna come to you. So I wanna make sure that you're aware of.
Well, we thought about doing a survey.
Bianca actually was working on one, but the survey that we did was more about how we could improve. We didn't include costs in there.
We're doing the fee study when?
We actually are getting ready to finalize it. We
So
pretty
are
much
we gonna
looked
have that in place before the new session starts?
Bef-
When does the new session start, September?
Well, the
Wait,
programs
no.
already are
Summer.
ongoing.
I mean, May, so
Summer.
summer. Okay, so what we have in place now, we wouldn't necessarily change pricing on until after May.
It would be up to the council. I mean, we could change pricing, but we could wait. I mean, it just depends on what directive you've given me. So we can increase it.
But aren't almost all of these programs that you just showed us active programs right now?
Yes. So they go on a month-to-month basis.
Yeah, so we could increase, once the fee study is
Yes.
completed, we could increase fees, so much per year for, a couple of years out till we stabilize or something. But we cannot continue charging what we charge. But I agree with Mr. Silva, this is fantastic. It's an eye-opener for us.
Too.
Well, it's, what's discouraging is to know that we were canceling programs or canceled a program because we maybe weren't doing a good job of monitoring the cost of the program versus the revenue that we were bringing in.
And also, I think that benefit could greatly improve by getting more children in it.
Absolutely.
We struggled to get the 18. I asked staff, hey, if you want to continue this program, you're going to have to find a way to market it so that more children
Right.
come into it. So
Well, and I think we could do a better job maybe of partnering with the schools so that the information goes out to parents so that they understand what the options are. Especially, I would think that children who are homeschooled, who are looking for enrichment activities that are not necessarily provided within the school, but
Some
are
social
looking
interaction.
for, right, the social interaction.
yeah,
So
that would be great.
What do we think the time frame is to complete the fee study before we would know, before it'd be back in front of us to possibly decide on raising?
So we're actually pretty close to finishing it, so probably, I would think maybe, February or March, we would present it to you and bring it. It's crucial for us to do it because of the fees that we're going to be establishing for the aquatic center. So it's a project that, we're currently doing, so.
I just
We're
wonder
finance-
if it wouldn't be prudent to do some kind of immediate increase, on some level, to at least start lessening that blow, because we know the fee study is going to say that we're less than
It's
half
very-
of where we should be. And, even if we say, okay, effective next month, we raise it 25%, so that it lets people kind of ease their way into it, rather than come back in 4 or 5 months and say, we're raising it 75%, or 100%, or something like that, where then everybody's got that shell shock of it.
The only thing that I would caution you is, I don't know if, I know that in the past, families have paid, at least 2 or 3 because they want to be guaranteed their.
Stepping stones, yeah, would be
So
one
I
of
don't know if we can look at that, but maybe keep in mind too that maybe some families have paid in advance.
could we say, to Mr. Jackson's point, could we say February 1st, all programs are going to be increased by 25%?
And I think that's probably pretty reasonable, because I'm thinking, if anything, maybe they're 2 months into, paying for the program, so.
I think
perhaps
the
we
only
can
thing that would
consider-
concern me about that is that we would adopt a fee increase, and then subsequent to that, we'll probably adopt another one after the fee study comes in. Personally, I would prefer that we wait until we get a real good picture of where we need to go, and recognizing that would probably be a pretty significant increase, that we gradually increase fees on a set schedule so that ultimately we get where we need to go.
Here's my fear of the timing with when the fee schedule would become available. If people have already paid a couple of months in advance and we're in the middle of building the budget for 1920. And that whole thing with how much of a shortfall we're gonna have in the Parks and Recreation budget. What I don't wanna see happen is have the Parks and Recreation budget cut for personnel because we don't see the revenue matching those costs. We know the fees are gonna have to go up, so I would rather see a gradual increase over a series of months. It's not gonna be a surprise when the fee study gets here, that the fees are gonna have to be raised significantly. So do we,
But in some structured way, and not just some random way.
oh, right. So that's why I'm proposing, if we do a 25% fee increase February 1st, people have, the rest of this month, December, January, to get used to the idea that February 1st, prices are gonna go up. Fee study comes in, we figure out how much more those fees need to be raised. Maybe there's a second fee increase effective, well, these programs run until May, right?
Yes.
So then maybe the next fee increase comes at the end of summer.
Well, I
Madam
agree
Mayor?
with the mayor. I think that
Excuse
it
me,
would,
we have a little bit of a legal issue, perhaps that will assist you in deciding how to proceed. To set a fee, you need evidence that it's the reasonable cost of the service provided. You're pretty sure these fees are too low. My suggestion, and I quickly spoke to Marcella about this, would be, let's ask Wildan to pull out these fees from the study, bring them to you first, so you see what you have now and where you're going. Based on that, if you want to do an incremental increase, you're going to do it with, I think, the knowledge that Councilmember Silva was suggesting. Does that work? Because you're so close on the fee study, if you're just dealing with these fees, it shouldn't be, and I'm speaking theoretically, have obviously not spoken to Wildan about this, too difficult to bring you those fees only for these.
See if we can get them by the first meeting in January, okay? That would be good. Should we ask our finance director how she's feeling about any of this? Are we heading in the right direction, where we want them to be?
Those fees, if you mean pull them out of the study is still in progress and those numbers are not. Only because we added Actually, the study was almost complete, but at the end, there was an additional, actually several new fees, several new services that they wanted to add into the study. So that delayed the whole process. We're going back and forth. At the end also, there was also for the aquatic center, a lot of fees that were not included. So I went in, I developed this budget based on San Diego numbers and so on, adjusted it to the valley. And so that delayed the thing so much more. So at this point today, I finally sent them the information that they needed to finalize it, but it's still gonna take time to review those last numbers. So again, like our city manager said, in February, that would be the time. I'm not sure what our city attorney is recommending to pull those fees and present them
So of these,
separately.
like these 6 or 8 programs for recreation, can those be presented earlier than the full presentation on
By
all the
Wildan.
other fees? Yes.
By Wildan.
Or somebody, it's not.
I think what can happen is maybe I can refer this request to our director, because those fees, we already have them in place. So it's basically coming back with those fees, the various projects, those fees, and what the true cost is.
Right.
And then just determine where you want to put them.
So what we want to do, I think, Ms. Salcido, is we want to stop the bleeding. And we don't want to be forced with options that include closing, decreasing, reducing.
Right.
Right? So what we want to do is right-size the fees to cover more of the costs so that we can expand the programs rather than
absolutely,
reducing.
and I
So
agree.
can we get a carve-out from the consultant just on our recreation fees so that we can make decisions sooner rather than later?
Well, maybe even more to the point is to fulfill the legal requirement that our city attorney is talking about. Is that something that has to come from Weldon, or can it come from our finance director?
Well, we already,
Come from wherever.
Yeah.
wherever it needs
long
to
as you
come
have
from.
the
It doesn't have to come from Wildan.
So-
It's Wildan who's working on it right now.
Correct, but if Ms. Salcedo has those numbers for these specific programs, and she can make a presentation and
Yes,
present
you're
what the
correct,
cost is,
absolutely.
as opposed to what our fee is, then that gives us a legal justification to make
Yes,
the
exactly.
increase without having to wait for Weldon to come in and do all their stuff.
Assuming she does have that information, yes, absolutely.
The information that I have is what the cost of the various positions is, which is basically the way it was presented here. This is how many kids we have, and this is how many people we need to manage those programs. And then, which is basically what Wildan is doing. Wildan is taking what are the salaries for these various employees and how many employees you need per program, and then we allocate the cost. We know what the cost is, and then based on that, you know what the cost is, you know where the fees are at, and where do you want to put them now.
So-
That's very simple. I can provide that to our Director of Community Services. I always get him confused. And that can be presented to you.
I guess, Betsy, would the presentation that we just saw right now would that suffice the legal threshold that we need? I mean, Adriana showed us where our costs are, what our fees are, where the shortfall is. That, to me, seems like that's the legal justification we need to make a determination to raise fees.
I don't dispute that you have the evidence to raise the fees. One of the other things that you probably will look at, and if you wanted to do an interim one, it might give Wildan time to do this, is when you do the fee, you do the reasonable cost of the service and all the direct costs and the indirect costs. I'm not sure if this has indirect costs in it.
Doesn't.
Which doesn't mean you have to include them right away. That could come later.
And I think for purposes of what the mayor and I were talking about, is we're just talking about a incremental increase of 25%. I think we all know the study's gonna say that we're gonna have to increase it probably over 100% if we're gonna try to be net neutral. So to introduce a 25% increase today, effective February 1st, do we have the legal justification to say so?
Assuming you pull all of those things together in like a mini fee report, you bring it back with a notice, you publish notice, bring it to a notice public hearing, then adopt the fee, they're effective immediately.
That's something we could actually do the next meeting.
Well, not next meeting, because we're celebrating
No.
Alan's leaving next meeting, but Ephraim,
But,
how do you
yeah.
feel about that?
Have to have
No,
a 10-day
no,
notice.
I get it.
I think we're just trying to soften the blow from it
Yeah, no,
being
I
such
get-
a huge hit in whenever, March, May, April. We take it as a gradual, so if we raise it 25% now and then another 50 or 75% later, it's not as bad.
Well, and because the programs go on hiatus over the summer, if we do an increase in February and then an increase in September,
The other information that I would like to see, and I don't know if it's part of the report or not, Adriana, but it was mentioned earlier. I'd like to see
Acre feet of water.
how long these fees have been in place in the actual report, and perhaps calculate for us cost of living increases over that time frame since the last change. And also a comparison of what other cities may be charging for recreation programs, if we can do a comp.
And I will tell you, as part of this, I did look at what other cities provide, and they charge more. That was actually one of the recommendations is another city does a 4-hour program during the summer and charges almost double what we charge.
Yeah.
And then if you want your child to be part of the morning and afternoon, you pay double the fee.
So
So
I'd
it's
like
a
to
little
see that
bit-
information as well.
Yes, and then I did look at the programs that other cities provide, and they don't provide anywhere near as long as we do. Per week, maybe we provided 6 to 8 hours for some of these programs. Other ones are just like a 2-week, or it's in craft, like maybe during the break, and they charge like $20 per kid. So our programs are a lot more extensive
Yeah.
and involved than other cities. So, and I know we're a larger city, so that also has, it's a bit of a difference. But yeah, I did look, and none of the other cities provide this level of programming.
and I think once the word gets out to people, the richness of the programs that are being offered, I really think we're gonna see our
Yeah, stepping
numbers
stones, I get a lot of people who are
skyrocket.
from El Centro,
So-
yeah, for sure.
And just real quick, and again, not to be difficult, but I'm sure that our Parks and Recs Commissioner should be maybe part of that process as well, right? So I'm assuming if they meet in December, that, would you think it'd be appropriate, Mayor, that we at least give them an opportunity to
Yeah,
chime in?
Increase, we'll let them know that that's the direction that we're going.
Right.
I mean, it's not an option for us to close, reduce, decrease. No. So I think we need to be, and I think, Ms. Nava, you've absolutely hit it on the head, which is, compared to other programs, we have very, very rich programs at a very low cost. So let's continue our very rich programs at the cost that's appropriate. Okay, with the potential for an increase in February. Marcella, if you could circle the wagons and figure out how much information could be made available to us based on the fee study. But we know that the fees have not been raised for a very long time. We know cost of living has gone up substantially, and we know that minimum wage and other ancillary costs have also increased. Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing awareness to this.
I know, these aren't fun presentations, but.
Well, it's going to get better. We just know there's
It's good
lots
to
of
know
room
the
for improvement.
facts.
That's right. Okay, now we'll have our brief update, please, by our police chief, followed by our fire chief. So Chief, what can you tell us about what's happening with the caravan?
So good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Just a quick update. So I think for probably the last 2 weeks, if not longer now, we've been having updates from our federal partners at Border Patrol and Customs, as well as the chiefs and the sheriffs. We've all been meeting. What I can tell you today is not much more than we're probably seeing on our national news, right? The majority of the caravan has gone to the Tijuana border. However, there are approximately about 3,000 migrants that are in Mexicali. Every indication so far is that they are sheltered there in place. The chief from Calexico has said that everything has been peaceful on our side, and there have not really been too many issues. The most important thing is to understand is that our federal partners are really in control of this. It's very fluid and dynamic for them. They are moving their resources as they feel to adequately address it. They have done some hardening of the entry points, right, to mitigate some of that. But there has been no request for law enforcement in the region to date. And most important, I think it's important for us to also recognize, because of SB 54, clearly really limits our ability to help in this immigration process. I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Any comments or questions, Mr. Sullivan?
No, my last visit to Mexicali, I did see a very large law enforcement presence on the US side, and I didn't see anything that was, I don't know, concerning or anything.
Mr. Garcia?
Yeah, the last time I was in Mexicali, I saw a very proactive response by our federal officers, and they were very concerned with what was going on, and you could clearly see the influx of people, especially close to the border. It's very concerning. I think it's something that we're going to be dealing with for some time.
Yeah, I think to that point, our challenge will be, as you know, the capacity to process all those bodies is going to take months. And so really what happens to all those folks that are sitting and waiting and trying to determine their fate, right? And so that anxiety, I think, is really what is going to be our challenge moving forward.
Jackson?
Yeah, you know, I've been approached by several of our law enforcement officers, as well as some of the federal law enforcement officers, whether it be Border Patrol or CBP, with the question of, and I brought this up at the presentation where Customs and Border Patrol were at, the chiefs were here, was the sanctuary city situation, as far as where does that hinder us in communications and working together with federal law enforcement officials. And they both, you know, clearly stated that it is a hindrance. And I guess I'd like to get some feedback from you, Chief, as far as, your thought of that. I know I've been approached by several of our officers that have said to me that it is an issue. And more specifically, they've asked me, if the city of El Centro is going to take a stance like the city of Imperial and opt out of the sanctuary state initiative, so that to, in essence, unhandcuff our officers so that they can work hand in hand with federal authorities. And as you said, and it's been well documented, that this is an issue that's probably going to last several months, maybe 6 or 8 months. I think I heard on the news today that a lot of the people that are filing for asylum could take 5 to 6 months before they even get a hearing. So we have to think long-term. And I'm just wondering if now's not the time to at least broach that conversation and see if that's something that as a city council, we want to approach and research.
So to tackle it, probably first from a public safety and really the perspective of policing and ensuring public safety and the safety of our residents here in El Centro, I've always been of the belief that the immigration laws on the federal level are really left to our federal partners, right? For a multitude of reasons that we all are familiar with as it relates to the openness in our community, feeling that they can come to the police and feel that they're not going to be deported or detained because when they're a victim of a crime or a witness of a crime. I think that's inherently important. As it relates kind of to that political issue, I'll try to stay out of that a bit as it relates to what Imperial's going to do and what we need to do. I'm going to defer a little bit to that to our city attorney, because my reading of SB 54, it's state law. Now, if we try to opt out or not, I still believe we are going to have implications that do not allow us to participate in some of the, I'll use the term mutual aid with our federal partners. We have discussed this in our meetings, and our federal partners understand the challenges that we are facing because of the Trust Act. And so we have to be very careful, particularly that I don't put our officers in harm's way by having them doing anything that could be construed as assisting or partaking in the immigration piece of that legislation. So, again, I will defer to the city attorney, but my belief is as I read it, and I was just actually reading through it again yesterday, anticipating this, knowing that we are really going to have to leave a lot of that enforcement and all that activity to our federal partners. I don't know, Madam City Attorney, do you have any opinion to that?
I think the ability to opt out has not yet been determined, except on an initial level by federal courts. It has a long way to go through the appellate process. There is a Superior Court decision from...
Is it San Francisco?
No, I don't think it's San Francisco. It's from a Southern California county that provides that charter cities are exempt from the sanctuary city law. It has not, it is, I'm sure, being challenged, but there has been no decision on it. Whether or not you wish to take that action, understanding that it also is subject to challenges, is up to you. There's points on both sides.
When you say the charter cities are exempt from that, does that mean that 54 doesn't apply to the city of El Centro?
Yes, that's what the ruling says. Is it correct? I mean, if an appellate court will decide.
Oh, interesting.
Council Member Jack, I think to your point, it's my belief that we got to continue to police our city and provide whatever assistance that we believe we can legally to our federal partners. And we're very sensitive to that. You know, talking with the undersheriff and the sheriff about this, you know, there's things that we will do in our county to protect our communities and then allow for mutual aid and other things to help. But
Yeah,
at this point, I believe our federal partners have this under control and are moving resources as they believe is appropriate to address the issue, because they understand some of the challenges that we have. You know, not to mention really is just our staffing issues, right, as a region. And so that also complicates our ability to take care of the home front, so to speak.
Yeah, and let me be clear, I certainly am not bringing this subject up because I believe we should federally deputize our officers to go be Border Patrol officers. I don't believe that at all. I do agree with you that this is a federal issue and federal law enforcement officers will do their job in enforcing the laws of the border. Where I see that there potentially could be issues is the free sharing of information, the working in tandem so that we're always updated to issues that may, or, and maybe may not affect El Centro, but if the time should come where there is an influx of people coming across and we just don't have that ability to have that close-net, communication because we'd be in some kind of violation of 54, that's the only thing I'm concerned about.
Yeah, there's nothing in the law that I've read specifically to the intelligence of sharing of information. It really drills down where it's more specific about individuals that are being detained or released and those types of things.
Okay.
Any comments, Mr.?
No, I just appreciate it, Chief. It appears that, we have a surveillance role in this. I'm sure our public appreciates the fact that there is a plan in case 3,000 people try to rush that fence and it gives me the assurance. So again, I do appreciate our mayor keeping this on the front burner and you guys staying on top of that. So Chief, as always, we appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
So Chief, what's happening with regard to ensuring that the border stays open? I mean, here we are coming up on a crucial time of year for pretty much anybody and everybody that's in retail, right? So our business owners that kind of get by on this next 6-week period of time. I know that Tijuana was closed. They closed Tijuana, San Isidro to do some reinforcement there. We have a lot of commerce back and forth here, and for that border to be closed would be extraordinarily detrimental.
So I can't speak to their specific plan, but what I can tell you is the leadership at the federal level is very understanding of that free movement of commerce, right? And they're doing everything that they believe humanly possible to facilitate and continue to ensure that that happens. But at my next briefing, I'll be sure to bring that up.
Thank you.
But obviously, that is of a concern for obvious reasons.
Yes. Okay. Any additional questions? Thank you, Chief,
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you. Thank you,
Appreciate
Chief.
it. Welcome home, Chief Herbert. Are you rested?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I didn't go out on this last one.
Oh,
so,
well,
yeah.
then you're really rested.
Yeah. But thank you. Welcome home to you.
Thank you.
So, almost 2 weeks ago, we sent a crew up to Ventura County. El Centro sent 3 personnel. The countywide, the response was 21 personnel. They assisted with those fires for nearly a week in Ventura County, returned safely without incident. The situation, here we are in November. Again, historically, October has been the significant month for that, but the fuel levels still remain dry. And every day we're looking at the weather reports throughout the state. When you get the high winds, that's when you've got issues. And what's happened up in Paradise is just unprecedented, unimaginable. So we remain ready to go if called, and that's really where we stand.
Thank you, Chief.
All right,
Thank you,
thank
Chief.
you. What IT, let's get, okay, next up, we have our consent agenda, that's items 3 through 8. Anybody need anything pulled? Okay. With regard to item number 8, that's the shelter crisis, declaring a shelter crisis. I think I am going to pull that item just for a little greater clarity. So let's have a motion to approve, oops, sorry, Diane. Well, I tell you what, let's approve items 3 through 8, but then have a discussion on item number 8, okay? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Whoops.
canceled it, so.
Oh, all
We
right,
can try-
so
we can
never
do the-
mind, we are going to go back to approving items 3 through 7.
You screwed it all up.
Sorry, she canceled it, so now we have a do-over. Have a motion by Jackson, second by Silva, and that passed 5-0. Okay, if we could pull item number 8, please. This has to do with funding that would be available. We are declaring a shelter crisis. Okay.
So hello, Honorable Mayor. So I have Tony Phillips here. He has been working with Imperial County's Continuum of Care for the Homeless Emergency Aid Program funding. I invited him today because I thought this item could be pulled. And if you needed a little bit more background, I included a presentation as well. But if in case we go into specifics, Tony could help me out with this. I don't know if you want to say a few words, Tony, before starting out, or?
No, I'm sure that many of you have contextually the big picture of what HEAP funding looks like. It's, the county will be the applicant for these funds, and the city will presumably, I think predictably, be one of many stakeholders as subrecipients of those funds. And it's been really fortunate for my position to be able to work with both the city manager and with Ms. Nava as well on this process. So, I mean, I'm more than happy to answer any big picture strategic questions you might have about countywide implementation, also about the process and timeline of how we do this going forward. But I'd defer to Adriana's presentation for the moment.
So SB 850 established the Homeless Emergency Aid Program. So what this is, it's a one-time flexible block grant to address immediate homeless challenges. As mentioned by Tony, jurisdictions like El Centro are not eligible to apply for this funding directly to the state. It has to go through the Imperial County Continuum of Care, and then from there, the city could be a potential subrecipient. In order for us to be a direct subrecipient, we have to declare a shelter crisis. So when does the shelter crisis end? It ends once we obtain the funding from the state, if we do obtain that funding. The amount that would be allocated to our Imperial County COC would be $4.8 million, 5% of which is required to be a youth set aside. That's about $242,970. The resolution also includes the 2017 point-in-time count because by state law, the resolution needs to include the number of homeless persons identified in our locality for that year, 2017. So for ours, it was 281 homeless persons. If it were actually for this last point-in-time count, it would have been 305. That's our number for 2018.
Is that housed and unhoused combined? Is the 281 housed and unhoused? So they don't make a differentiation?
No.
Okay, so
Just
that's
based on the
total.
count.
'Cause I think what we've seen in the point-in-time count, the number of sheltered individuals has actually gone up. We're finding more bed space. Is that correct?
It is correct to an extent, Madam Mayor. You have a limited number of continuum of care counted sheltered beds in the city of El Centro. Woman Haven and Catholic Charities both provide shelter operations, and the county also operates at Las Brisas Apartments in the city limits. I believe that's 18 units of housing that we count, and so that number is going to remain rather static, at least until, presumably, the impact of some of what we're talking about with HEAP funds. Your share of countywide homelessness is about 20%. Roughly 1 in every 5 homeless people sheltered or otherwise counted in this county are in the city of El Centro. And the unsheltered population includes a range of special needs populations we can discuss as well at any time. But that number has grown. And I think as we better implement some best practices borrowed from other areas to improve our point-in-time count methodology, I believe we might still be undercounting, and we could see the number grow again.
So this, just this slide shows a little bit of what are the eligible uses for this funding. Imperial County COC has not issued a request for projects. Through the previous allocation for cash funding, they issued a request for projects, but in conversations with Tony, it's something that they will be moving forward. However, they've been working on submitting the application that's due December 31st to the state for the allocation. Some of the eligible uses of funds for the $4.8 million include services, rental assistance or subsidies, capital improvements, as well as administrative costs capped at 5%.
I just want to, I know that on one of the deals, and I appreciate Mrs. Solorio being here from Spread the Love, and I would ask for some maybe feedback from you folks about if her family reunification program would be eligible for funding, or if that's a category that we can go after. I know both Councilmember Garcia and Jackson have been contributors to that family reunification plan. But do you guys believe under the block grant or under the HEAP grant, is there services, or is family reunification an eligible service in the grant offering?
It is, and I'm going to give you some very just candid comment about that. There have been cities that have undertaken fairly robust relocation programs and derisively called Greyhound therapy in the press that I don't think that you want to get involved with. Nevertheless, I think it's not just anecdotal. I think there's pretty solid evidence that there's some in-migration of homelessness, of people who are disconnected, severed from otherwise intact systems of care, networks, families outside the area. And I mean, it's certainly an eligible service designed within an entire continuum of care that begins with assessment, establish connections with someone on the other end, the case manages the entire process of truly reconnecting, then absolutely. The strength of the program will have to do with its design and its conformity to both evidence of need, and so we'll want to document those things that I think we all suspect, but also compliance with some practices that we'll take from other communities. Absolutely an eligible service.
And I just wanted to say, and the thing that I appreciate about Spread the Love is it's not necessarily, it's actually Greyhound therapy on steroids, because the intake process that she has, I mean, these are substantiated, and family members who are willing, and I don't know if I can maybe just ask Jessica real quick, or Ms. Solorio, how many families do you believe you've reunified since you started your reunification program?
Well, we just did the count today, actually, and there were 6 that we actually sent on a bus to be with family or friends, and then there was 19 that we actually took from the street that were chronically homeless and put them in studio.
So I believe it's effective, and I know that you guys are having conversations. I appreciate the staff report, but she's doing a good job. And what makes it unique, I do believe that there is programs here that are importing folks from other communities, and then they're not successful in the program, and then they're putting them on the street. And those are the ones that I believe, that's the demand that they've created for Spread the Love. So I'm hoping that we can definitely, include that family reunification program. I mean, it's fully vetted and it works, so I'm hoping that we can give some consideration for that.
I would say 2 things about that, Councilman. First of all, I've had the good fortune of speaking to and working with Ms. Solorio as well, and I think the world and all of the programs that she's delivering. And she won't say it, but I will say it on her behalf, delivering at virtually no compensation. I mean, you're talking about a community service that's working without budget. And
Right.
Although Spread the Love was an applicant in a recent funding opportunity that was not selected for funding, I think that has to do more with we, the county, providing them with the capacity and infrastructure support necessary to be able to just, it's just how to tell the story. I mean, some of this is just grant seeking. It's a language issue more than anything. And I know very well her willingness to adopt and implement whatever strategies and practices are best evidenced around the country. So I want to say on the record that I strongly encourage you to be part of the HEAP process moving forward as well. Secondly, however, and this is something that Chief Johnson, who's on my board of directors, one of many bosses to whom I report, repeats over and over, that homelessness is a regional problem. And while it affects El Centro disproportionately to the rest of the county, every stakeholder in the county needs skin in this game. That means that picking up people experiencing homelessness in Imperial and delivering them to the doorsteps of a service provider in El Centro without any long-tail follow-up plan is not a solution. It's passing a buck to your responsibility. And I'm not accusing anyone of that. But that happens to seats of government. It happens in counties with one city that has a cluster of services available that overmatches anything available in the rest of the county. And so we will absolutely want to beef up and invest in the capacity of El Centro to respond to its current and foreseeable problems, but not in such a way that it absolves other jurisdictions and communities from their share of the problem as well.
And if I may, real quick, Madam Mayor, just real quick, another quick comment. I believe Councilmember Jackson, myself, we're ultimately been looking for that strategic plan. And, and I do appreciate the fact that we are considering, action and declaring, but ultimately we need that blueprint, on what we're gonna do. And, we hear, well, we need funding, we need shelter, but we do need that blueprint on how we're gonna handle it. And it's unfortunate, but it appears that our city is the one that's carrying the burden of this from our municipality services, the health risks that are associated with it. So I'm hoping that everything that we're doing here leads us to that final product of that blueprint so we can find out what resources are needed. So again, I just want the assurance that we are going and paddling in that direction, that at some point we're gonna see that blueprint or that strategic plan that can come before us so we can say, this is how we're gonna take care of it.
Councilmember Cardenas, I could not agree more that what we need, and we need it urgently, is a comprehensive countywide strategic plan that incorporates assessment of all needs, regional, by type of population, by age and gender, and also by project type. While we do not have enough shelter capacity in this county, what we have even less of is permanent affordable housing to offer to people completing transitional projects and to move into. We do not have adequate employment and training programs for people who are at imminent risk of homelessness. We don't have a lot of the other bells and whistles that touch other departments. And I've been tasked by the board, the Continuum of Care Board, as well as the Department of Social Services at the county, working with the county executive officer to draft that plan. Where we stand right now is that we have the elements of a plan, but identifying what we need is still one step short of, these are the responsible parties, these are the achievable goals, these are the timelines, and these are the implementation steps. Those, as long as I have your ear, I think will entail the city councils of each of the jurisdictions designating a front person to contribute to that plan under the county, so that this does not become just a great big plan handed down to smaller players who haven't had a voice in its drafting. I think that that's the next step. We are months out, but not many months from having that blueprint, and part of the reason that we are taking our time in soliciting HEAP applications from the cities is to give each of the cities an opportunity to identify its priorities and know that that fits within a strategic plan as well.
Well, I think we need to go on record and say everybody has to be part of the solution. And I really am very encouraged by something that they've done in San Diego. You know, the city council people in San Diego are elected by district. And the city council has said, we will locate homeless assistance in every single district. So you, Mr., to the extent you represent this area, part of that burden is going to be within your district. And so it gets spread that way, because we have a situation like the city of Indio, where they started all in addressing the homelessness issues and crises, and pretty soon all of Coachella Valley was coming to Indio. And so this is one of those situations where you don't want the field of dreams, right? You don't want to do the, if you build it, they will come, right? You want everybody to be responsible. So if you say that City of El Centro has 20% of the point-in-time count, then there should be a similar allocation that we can pinpoint for all of the other jurisdictions and say, Calexico, you need to find a solution for 17% and so on and so on. Because that is one of my biggest fears, that as the county seat with the greatest access to resources, if we go down this path, that we then become the hub, right, the magnet, and that's not
And
the
Madam
way
Mayor,
this should be.
could I add one thing? Like most state programs, this money comes with a hook. And the hook is that when you adopt this ordinance, you are making a policy decision to house homeless. Whether or not these programs work, whether or not you receive the funding, there are some benefits to the law that does this, such as the ability to house people in code-deficient structures, but there also is a clear obligation placed on the city. I think that needs to be clear. It's not just about the money. You're making a major policy decision.
Yeah, and I am concerned about that. You know, I recently just got back from National League of Cities, and I took a tour first day of that specifically talked about the homeless and the transitional housing and all the aspects that are going on in LA. And they are also doing a thing where each district has to have, I think, 218 transitional housing units per district by, I think, 2020 and such. And we visited some of them. My concern, though, is that, and I'll be frank, and I think I was frank last time some representatives from Continuum Care was here, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in you guys because there has been months and months and months and months of meetings and absolutely no action, no plan. We still have the same amount of homeless on the streets we do today as we did 2 years ago when you guys started meeting. And it just seems like every time we get an update, it's just an update of the same thing we heard last time with no further purpose or you know, there might be a lot of passion on this board. There might be a lot of good ideas, but nothing ever gets implemented. And I think to kind of speak to the mayor's point is like, I don't want to be the one, you know, doing all the heavy lifting. And it seems like everybody looks at El Centro to do everything for the entire county. It's like when we talk about the homeless issue in Imperial County, they don't talk about Imperial County or they don't talk about Brawley or Calexico. It's always El Centro. You know, El Centro's got this big homeless issue. Well, no, Imperial County has a homeless issue. And if the burden's not going to be distributed, you know, evenly or at least fairly, I just don't know that we want to get into the business of taking care of everybody else's problems.
Excellent points, Councilmember Jackson, and thank you for being as frank as you are. And to address that a bit, no, I mean, really.
I typically am.
No, it's important for me to hear. In full disclosure, I drive over the mountains from San Diego to come and work here. I have been doing so since June, and so getting my hands around some of the history of this continuum of care and its status quo has been a bit of a learning experience. And I look forward to bringing with me experience that I bring from Riverside County's continuum of care and San Diego's and Orange Counties and Fort Worth and other areas that I've worked, what I have seen happen and what can happen. And it's going to take me just a second, but to address kind of how it is that we hear this and nothing ever changes, bear in mind that until the County Board of Supervisors in June of this year designated the Department of Social Services as the lead applicant and collaborative entity on behalf of the continuum of care, that role had always been filled voluntarily by Catholic Charities based out of San Diego who dispatched one executive here a few hours a week. The level of commitment is altogether different. Today, that level of commitment includes a board of directors that is represented by your chief of police, by two other local officials here in El Centro as well as throughout the county. Moreover, because of that commitment where we had before an entire continuum of care funding for a year last year of just about $250,000, that's for all homeless programs in the county, we will this year have $6.5 million in grant and contract funds to spend from public sources alone. The next step, however, is for us to invest in the nonprofit sector, which includes mostly smaller community-based organizations like Ms. Solorio's, for instance, to allow them to compete with the bigger players outside of this county. And unfortunately, although we have 180,000 people and San Diego has 3.5 million, Washington, D.C. demands exactly the same standards of us that they do of them, and getting us there, that's the next bar. So I hope that I see you a year from now and you have an altogether different faith in the continuum of care.
I do too. Yeah.
But there is kind of a money first approach. But I also want to touch on something that the city attorney said. I don't want the city of El Centro to be in the homeless business. I really don't. I don't think that city-operated shelters are in the future. I don't think that that's the solution. In fact, having spoken with Adriana just yesterday and having met with the city manager as well and talked, I know that there are nonprofit providers within the city who can do the work through the city's advocacy and in partnership and in collaboration with this council that keeps you out of that business altogether. If this council chooses not to pass a resolution, there's yet time. I mean, that's not something that absolutely has to be done tonight. But the benefit I could see to declaring a shelter crisis resolution is that there are forthcoming opportunities, one, for which you may be eligible as a direct applicant, and two, private funds that need to respond urgently to what's really a crisis. I mean, it's of critical proportions in this city, and so all of that flowing together is kind of my whole purpose. That's why I come out, and so that's my passion. And thank you again, Councilmember, for sharing your thoughts.
We know if we don't pass a resolution, we're not entitled to any of the funding, right? I mean, that's
The city itself,
right. So,
entities within the city, certainly.
okay, so let me ask a question with regard to one of the things I don't see that we've talked about here is access to behavioral health, mental health services, substance abuse counseling. Would those types of services be eligible? And if so, who's going to provide it? I absolutely agree. We should not be in the shelter business.
I would like to bracket that because I actually really look forward to answering that specific question, but I defer to the chief's comments.
So Mayor and Council, let me just say a few things. Obviously, one of the first things that I was volunteered and eager to take on was becoming part of the continuum of care. And as Tony just mentioned, we were in a transition, right? And what I can tell you with Peggy Price leading that charge from the Department of Social Services as really the leader of the continuum of care now has brought focus and has brought direction and really results. What also came along with that is when we had a presentation by Tony, and I wanted to come and defend Tony because I was a strong advocate to the board to say we needed to hire him as a consultant based on the limited interaction I had with him and his understanding of this whole homeless issue. So I wanted to give the council a little bit of reassurance that we are moving in the right direction. We all understand that this takes time, but quite candidly, as Tony mentioned, there were a lot of folks that were volunteers, and we didn't have some of the really direction that we needed. I believe that is changing and has changed, and we will see that focus moving forward, and we will see the results of our labor in the next 6 months to a year to 18 months out. And I'll also, in one last point, as it relates to our nonprofits, those of us that sit on the COC understand and appreciate the importance of our nonprofit service providers to help us solve this problem, i.e., Ms. Valera, sorry, I went brain dead. But I actually encouraged her and others to really apply for that grant that Tony had talked about. And though she wasn't successful, I believe there will be other grants that she will be successful, and we're working on those things to ensure that our partners in that nonprofit arena are successful in teaming up and partnering with us to provide some of those services. So I just wanted to bring a little bit of clarity. I know Tony wasn't going to get too much into that, but I think it's important for you as elected officials to understand what the county has done by putting Peggy Price in charge and what COC, those of us on that board, did in hiring the services of Tony.
Appreciate it,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Madam Mayor, question?
Well, can I get
I
I need to get my answer to the,
And I want to thank you very
behavioral
much,
health
Chief.
question.
And I assure you, I didn't feel like I needed defending, but it's an able champion, and I appreciate your advocacy.
And he
Chief.
has a gun, so it's good.
So, well, that's what I would say. He's probably the meanest guy in the room. So, about behavioral health and about the fact that homelessness is at once a housing problem and a health and human services problem. And one of the things that challenges every single city and every region in this country is to bring together disparate interests in the public sector that are siloed off and don't overlap. And you know, that is not me casting blame on county offices. It is, however, an admission I think they would make themselves that they could always do better at overlapping. for a number of populations, including criminal justice diversion, for instance. The county jail last year booked 20,000 individuals. That's 20,000 bookings in a county of 180,000, which tells you that's a revolving door. Of those, 2,000 had no address at the time that they were booked. I mean, that's 10%. So your jail has begun to function as a de facto shelter setting, and without intensive mental health services, and with no case planning prior to discharge, and with no long-tail housing plan and treatment and follow-up. And all of those are part of the comprehensive strategy that we're working on developing. And we can fund that over time. Now, $4.8 million in HEAP funding sounds like quite a bit, I think, to the community-based organizations, but as all of you know, you can spend that in a hurry. 2 capital projects, you know, I mean, so this alone, while it's critical funding and its rightful share should be supporting projects in El Centro, I think 2 things. One, we do want to invest that in capital ways that, or at least a large share of it, that repays over time, and not spend it all on 1 year's salaries, and now we have to get it again next year. We might not ever get it again. And secondly, I think that we want to be very strategic about where, in a county that's 5,000 square miles, those funds get spent. No one in Imperial County wants to talk about the presence of Slab City. That's half your homeless population, however, and depending on it, how you count them, are they homeless or are they not, and all sorts of other issues. And you know, my priority for this city would be that 2 or 3 projects, some of which I know staff already have in mind and have talked with providers about. Let's see which of those rise to the top that we can get funded and out the door with this funding to make an immediate impact so that you see fewer people sleeping on your sidewalks and they have better outcomes.
Did you have a few more slides? I think one of the things we're looking at is a timeline.
So I didn't include a timeline as part of this. I did include the conversations that we had with the various nonprofits, which were also in your staff report. Each of them represented different projects that they had considered that the city would be a partner with them if they undertook each of these activities. So Woman Haven, we discussed 6 lots that the city, through the successor agency, has possession of. We don't own them per se, we would have to buy them, but that was one of the projects considered. The other one was Catholic Charities, which a day out type place at their site on Orange Avenue. And then Spread of the Love was the family reunification activity. So these are we met with each of the nonprofits, and these are the projects that they've discussed with us that we thought were pretty good projects. So I did want to point out that the resolution does not need to be adopted in order for a nonprofit to carry out an activity in El Centro. I just want to make that clear. So El Centro would just not be a direct recipient, but we don't need to be a direct recipient in order for a charity in El Centro to obtain the funding. Is that clear?
Yeah, and I guess I would like some more clarification, because that was explained on that tour I was on. I gotta be honest, I didn't totally grasp that, and I appreciate our city attorney kind of reminding me about that, because there was that element that when you do this, then you know, there is some, let's say, I don't want to say negatives, but maybe negatives
You
that
said
go with that.
obligations.
So,
Obligations.
yeah, so I guess my concern would be is, maybe can you expand on that a little bit of what some of those obligations may be?
The obligation, first of all, is that you are committing to solving, you are buying into the commitment that the state has made to try to solve the homeless issue by housing homeless and providing services. That's a policy decision, which you guys have discussed at length.
And sorry to interrupt, but does it require those 2 elements, services and housing, or can it be one or the other?
It's really both.
So we're committing to providing both.
You are committing to providing both. It's not contingent on funding, although obviously that's the quid pro quo. They're saying, hey, local jurisdiction, you do your share. We're delegating this to you to a certain extent, but in return, we're going to make this money available. If, for example, the money here was used for the jail, you've made a commitment. You may be able to revoke that commitment, it's not clear. but you still have made a commitment. So there's that commitment, and then if you do that, there are certain requirements and certain possibilities that you face. Some of them are good, like not having to house people in facilities that are code compliant, unless it's unsafe. One of the others is a possible requirement that you house them in your parks. There's a lot of obligation. There's a lot of obligations there, and I don't think they've been fully explored.
So-
I just wanted to be sure you understand that, like everything else with the state, many other things with the state of California, there's a hook in it when they give you money.
Yeah, I have a major concern about that. And I don't feel like I could support this at this time. I'm not saying I can't at some point in time, but at the very least, I certainly would make a motion to table this for further, you know, there's been a comment made by staff and also by, I'm sorry, Tony, your last name?
Phillips.
Mr. Phillips, that this isn't something that we have to do today, and I think that if we are somehow committing to something that we're not truly sure what we're committing to, I think that we need to take a step back and allow staff to maybe do some digging and research this a little bit more and bring back some more information to the council before we, you know, we might be allocating ourselves to something or obligating ourselves to something that we're not prepared to do.
But you also may look at it and decide that that's what you want to do.
And we may do that.
And
I just think that I, for one, need some more information.
I have enough questions where I would second that.
But okay, so I think that's a path that we're going. I think that we want to be very, very specific on what we want to see brought back. And that is, what are the duties and obligations on the part of the city if we adopt the resolution? Because if I'm looking at my agenda report, page 105, what I heard you say, Ms. Nava, is that all of these items undertaken by Woman Haven Catholic Charities, Spread the Love, those could go forward without the city committing itself through the resolution process. However, if we pass the resolution and we want to become a direct recipient of the funding, then we ourselves have to step into the Solve the Homeless, get on that bandwagon.
But I think we've said we don't want to be that. We don't.
I know,
Yeah.
that's
So
what
you
I'm
don't
saying.
have to be a direct
I mean,
recipient
I
in
love to
order
support Jessica
still
and all these other
To
groups.
still support, and that was my point
I
to
don't
you,
want it
is
to be
that you
another
don't.
obligation that we take on. I think we have enough as it is.
Can I chime in real quick, Madam Mayor? And again, I am supportive of Councilmember Jackson's comments, but again, I'm gonna preface this by giving me some grace to be a little difficult here, all right? But the alternative is status quo. And that's what we've been talking about is, hey, you know, we can't continue status quo. So again, if we don't consider this, or, you know, I agree with tabling it, you know, having a better understanding, but we're probably, it could be a slippery slope because we're agreeing to stay status quo. Now, the question that I would have, Mr. Phillips, is, and I'm just gonna ask you to lean on your experience, do cities require these types of resolutions to deal with homelessness issues?
No.
Okay.
And that's as frank as I can be about it. The truth is that, and this is probably just parsing terms, but you will not be a direct recipient of these funds, or likely any funds, insofar as the county is the direct recipient of those
Right,
funds.
right, right.
And even if the city did wish to expend HEAP funding itself, it would do so under subcontract to the county.
Right, but I mean,
Yeah.
the funding source would still be
A-
here.
absolutely,
It would
that-
come to us.
Yeah, sure.
And we'd be in a first-line position to have to do something with that funding.
Second line position, but yes, your contract would be with the County Department of Social Services in that event, and you would be held to the standards and accountabilities, and I think that the city attorney might have avoided using the term liabilities, but
I try to sometimes in public.
Kind of, you know, but there is exposure to getting into the business of direct service provision, whether that's housing or health and human services or what have you.
Madam Mayor, so perhaps I didn't read, perhaps I didn't read as much into the discussion that is taking place here in terms of the actual resolution. I thought the resolution was pretty straightforward, and I did not link the resolution with an intent from the city of El Centro to be a direct service provider.
That's
Am
correct.
I mistaken?
No, I agree, Councilmember Silva, and I think that city attorney and county, probably if we're going to, if the council decides to table this, we come back again. I think that there is a way to pass a resolution that's no harm, no foul. You just declare, there is de facto a shelter crisis in the city of El Centro. That does not put you necessarily into the business of competing for funds or expending those funds or managing those funds. Nevertheless, again, the projects that the city has considered so far don't require the resolution at all.
And they're not our projects. I mean, they're projects, but I mean, they're run by Spread the Love, Catholic Charities and such. And I think this council's always been very good about deferring to people that know more about it than us. And in this instance, there's groups out there, whether it be Catholic Charities or Spread the Love or whatever other groups are out there, that have been doing this for an extended period of time. They have a lot more breadth of experience and knowledge about this than we do. And I think, and I agree with what Mr. Cardenas is saying about we don't want to be status quo, and I certainly don't want to be that. I want to support these different agencies and whatever we have to do. I just don't want to get tangled into some state web that says that one day we get a letter from the state saying we've got to open Buckland Park and put up tents and start housing homeless. And you know, that could be a huge issue for us. And to come back and say in time and say, oh, well, we did this action that resulted in this, you know, would be devastating for us.
That has happened in my experience. I have seen the city of San Diego sued by public interest lawyers for enforcing vagrant, or the public sleeping ordinances because there was no alternative for those people but to sleep on the street. It cost tens of millions of dollars.
And the
they
advocates won the litigation.
I have seen that happen. And there's another reason that you don't want to take on something that is the county's responsibility. I mean, yes, bricks and mortar stuff the city can do. The city can, there's a lot of different sources of funding that you can do that you might have access to. The health and human service component of homelessness, though, is, under our state law, a county mandate. That's where that belongs, at the Department of Behavioral Health Services, at Public Health Authority, at what have you. I would just caution that that's not just a passing the buck, though, because you don't want the county setting policy for the implementation of programs in this city. So as long as we have an El Centro voice at all tables, then I think you're represented right.
And Mr. Phillips, if I may, I just want to say my comfort level has grown a lot just hearing you speak, and you got a rock star of a referral from our chief there, and so I'm very encouraged. I just want to ask you, what your relationship right now with Imperial County Continuum of Care is what?
I am a technical consultant retained under a hypothetical contract with the county that has not yet materialized.
Wow.
And my commitment is 30 hours a week, 2 days of which are done here locally. The remainder is done remotely. It's the kind of stuff that grant writers do. And I have responsibility for not only reporting to the board, but also completing funding applications and directing the board going forward.
And is that a one-year contract or multi-year contract?
Hasn't materialized.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
I don't know.
But there is no
Chief,
contract.
I have a boss in the room who can push for it. So
Chief,
it's,
we can't let this guy go.
we're looking at a year.
All right.
Mr. Phillips, do you have a sense as to what other jurisdictions are doing with regard to the resolution?
You know what I don't know, and the most directly applicable case would be that of Riverside, which is one of several other counties in the state that has placed the county itself in the role of collaborative applicant and lead agency. They've actually done incredible work
Yes,
in
they have.
Riverside.
Yes.
Despite a recent spike in homelessness, in a 5-year period, they decreased their overall sheltered and unsheltered homelessness by more than 40%. It was almost without precedent. And there, again, other than the city itself of Riverside, you have mostly smaller jurisdictions, and I know that they allow the county to take that leadership. I don't believe that they're adopting their own resolutions, although the city of Riverside may.
Madam Mayor, could I ask Mr. Phillips a question? Has the county adopted the the resolution proposed this evening?
The county has adopted the resolution. It was required as a condition of their application, and I thought that I would be coming tonight and tell you that the application has been submitted. It's actually in one final read that will be submitted tomorrow. And these funds are formulaic. They're coming to the county one way or another.
And have others, and have other cities submitted, other cities adopted this resolution?
Absolutely no city in this county other than El Centro has been as proactive and as aggressive and as forward-thinking as has your staff in anticipating the impact of these. And to my knowledge, no other city has even considered it yet.
Thank you.
And I don't mind if there's no harm in delaying the vote on and bringing it back with additional information. I think that's fine. Again, you know, my sense of the resolution is that it doesn't really bind us into doing anything that will be forced for us to do that. And about, you know, I appreciate the discussion and your thoughts, because I think perhaps we're a little sensitive to issues of homelessness, because even though you have recognized that this is a regional problem, that the lack of a strategic plan. But I tell you what, many folks in the community see this as a El Centro problem, and El Centro City Council not doing enough to help the homelessness, as was pretty evident in the last election cycle. So we understand the facts as we understand them, but I think, you know, from others folks, they're blaming us.
Yes, sir, Councilmember Sylvan. I have also produced a set of talking points that I think might be helpful if I can distribute to staff. And in fact, I'll copy each of your departments as well about we have report after report, but back in front flip card that we can see, these are the actual issues in a nutshell and how they affect you. And one of them is that I was asked actually by a community leader in Fort Worth, how come I can know how many deer there are out in the county, but I can't know how many homeless people there are? I said, because we don't ear tag them. Because you cannot affix radio collars to them, because these are human beings and they are not a protected species, and there is great mobility among human populations, especially those not tied to a property.
Right.
And so you see homeless people in Brawley yesterday that will end up in Calexico tomorrow, and on their way they will pass through El Centro. El Centro happens to be this is the seat of government, and this is where things concentrate. But you're absolutely right. I know that the county has a strategy to use some of its mobile facilities and some of its remote facilities and other reaches of the county to begin implementing the kinds of programs we're talking about. So they dealt with there rather than having to come here for a solution.
I know we're going long, but can I ask one follow-up?
Of course.
Just in regards to just, you know, whether it's a vagrants ordinance, a panhandling ordinance, or a soliciting ordinance. I mean, do you provide expertise in terms of maybe providing suggestions on the types of ordinances municipalities should have to not necessarily force them into the shelter, but to ensure that, you know, they are participating in the services? And again, I think of vagrants, I think of panhandling. Is that an area of expertise that you may have where you can provide suggestions not only to the county but to cities that say, hey, you need to beef up these ordinances to ensure that people are participating in the services?
I am aware of and would be more than happy to pass along policies and in some cases local statutes actually that I come across. I don't, however, have the ability to advise you legally as to, because
well,
a lot of them are problematic, as I think the city attorney might attest. But however, there's a bigger question there, which is what is the role of law enforcement and its collaboration with service providers in dealing with the public issues that arise from status quo homelessness. And you know, we have done a lot of research into crisis response teams that pair an officer with a mental health expert, for instance, and with diversion programs, alternative sentencing, these sorts of things. And law enforcement's absolutely essential in those regards. You know, I feel like I've just said something about a chief who I know to be understaffed with sworn officers, and so you know, we don't ask all of that of the city's law enforcement capacity, certainly. That, again, is a county-wide issue, and it is part of our strategy, though, what we're looking at.
So how about if we see this come back the second meeting in December with a targeted focus on what this specific resolution provision means? That whereas the city of El Centro affirms the city's commitment to combating homelessness and creating or augmenting a continuum of shelter and service options for those living without shelter in our communities. Specifically, the question is, what are the city's obligations should we adopt the ordinance? And what are our opportunities if we elect to simply allow, as you were saying, Mr. Phillips, nonprofit organizations within our boundaries to be the subrecipients, and the city of El Centro essentially bypass that opportunity? So I think that's a very narrow question that we want answered, okay?
Madam Mayor, can I suggest,
Because quite frankly, if this obligates us to open up Buckland Park for a tent, that's probably not gonna happen.
can I also suggest that, and I'm not sure if I heard that, Mr. Phillips, you were or not necessarily in agreement with the point in time count? Did you believe that that number may not be accurate, or I thought I heard 20% or maybe off by 20%, or did I hear that?
Whatever I did say is now flown right out of the, however, what I would say about that is that part of the problem with counting homeless people is that if they don't want to be counted, they're not counted. And so there's always going to be some underrepresentation. Another part of the problem is that some of this is done by simple observation, and who's to say how many people are sleeping under that tent? You know, we can note an encampment. Third, is simply being disheveled in public a sign of homelessness, or is it a sign of my 27-year-old who looks like a homeless person? You know, and so there are those things. But one of the reasons that I know that historically we have been undercounted is that there were communities in the county that were bypassed. I think that last year's count of 1493 is getting pretty close to an accurate number. And that's an increase of about 1,200 the year prior, and that seems to be, some of that difference can be made up for better implementation of the count. This year, it will be January the 25th, I believe, is our point in time count, should be pretty definitive. And if it is aligned with 1,500, I wouldn't be surprised if it's 17. It's about there.
My only suggestion is maybe, I do trust quite a bit, Spread the Love's count on homeless, especially in the city of El Centro. So maybe if they did bring that back in December, there was a conversation maybe we had with Spread the Love just to make sure that, at least when it comes to El Centro, maybe try to compare and contrast those numbers.
We will be needing Jessica to help us count homeless people in El Centro, absolutely. And if you weren't intending to, you are now on the hook.
All right, well, very good. I'm glad we didn't pass item number 8, because then we'd have to
Good job
redo what we
pulling
just
it.
did. So, thank you, Mr. Phillips, very much for being here. Ms. Nava, for your presentation. Good call, having him here. We will bring that back the second meeting in December, please. We'll move on now to item number 9, discussion necessary action regarding the appointment of Mr. Cardenas to the Friends of the El Centro Community Services Foundation. Could I have a motion to that?
Yeah, there you go, good. Just,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's, we're done.
Yeah,
We're
that's.
so done.
We don't have a speech or anything?
No,
No.
that's it.
I have a motion by Silva.
Do I abstain, or?
No, you can
I can
appoint
vote?
yourself.
All right, I'm gonna vote no.
Which is the one for no?
I thought we were getting rid of them.
I know.
We gotta keep them
All
around?
righty, we are at, and that's adopted. Okay, let's move on then to item number 10. And again, guys, to kind of move this item along, we all know what we
Yes.
do with regard to our CDBG funding, so,
Great job.
Great, thank you.
It's okay. Brevity. You know the definition of brevity?
I'm ready to vote.
Brevity?
Yes.
Okay.
The short version.
I'm completely ready to vote.
okay, well, all we're doing is kind of talking about the fact that we have our 2 public outreach sessions coming up in November, December, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. As you know, the entitlement process, it requires that we go through an annual action plan, RFP process, and we are getting ready to start the 2019-2020 year. As back in, I believe it was 2008, council had requested that we come before you before beginning the RFP process to get your input on what you were going to set as the priorities for the upcoming year. And that is why I'm here tonight. Whenever making your decisions of what you're going to establish as your priority, you do have to bear in mind that there's 3 national objectives for the CDBG program. We do need to meet one of these national objectives, either the 51% low mod, aid in prevention of elimination of slum or blight, or meeting other community development, community development needs. Some of the eligible activities include housing, public facilities, public infrastructure, public services, and economic development activities. For the the program year 2019-2020, as you know, the federal government doesn't give us the exact amount we're going to have for the upcoming year. So they direct us to establish our annual action plan based on the current year's funding. Whenever we came to you before with the annual action plan, we had approximately 464,000 or 463,000. We were fortunate this year that we had an increase. So that money was allocated out, and so we are going to be establishing our annual action plan based on this year's funding, which was 538,277. Of that, we have the 20% cap for planning and administration. We also have a 15% cap on public services, and we are anticipating the approximate same amount as this year for programming income of $30,000. Those also have the same 15 and 20% caps for the public services and planning and administration. So you have approximately 568,277 that we're going to be coming to you for allocation whenever we come through with once the RFP process is complete. We are planning on starting the RFP process tomorrow based on your recommendations tonight, and that process will run from tomorrow through January 3rd, and then we'll be coming back to you at a later time with the proposals that were received. As far as the public services portion, we do have a requirement to provide fair housing activities. Our annual contract with Inland Fair Housing and Mediation Board is $47,250, so that automatically has to come out of the public services portion. We do contribute at this time $5,000 a year to the HMIS system, and that is a suggested contribution, which would bring it up to $52,250. Some of the other activities that we do recommend is the housing activities. We do receive funding from home grants that we're using for housing rehab. There are some services that do not are not qualified for payment through those programs, including the lead-based paint abatement, asbestos testing and removal, and off-site improvements. So we, on an annual basis, we come to council requesting funding for housing activities to supplement the home grants.
Well, help me with this one just real quick, because for the last 3 years, we haven't dispersed any funding for lead-based paint, and the last 2 years for asbestos testing.
This year so far we have not, but we're still in the program year. I believe we did asbestos. For the asbestos lead-based paint, we have to have available because it is required on any older housing that we test for lead-based. The projects that we've been have done haven't required it.
Okay.
But we need
So
to
the
have that
5,000
funding
has to
available
stay.
to do the
Okay.
testing should it become
Okay,
available.
because just based on what you were able to provide us tonight, it looks like for 3 years running, we've done nothing or have had no dispersed amount for lead-based paint. Okay, all right.
Okay, then the last item would be the grant administration. It's for the salaries and expenses of running the CDBG program. Under the categories that you have available, we'll have approximately $113,655 available for program admin, and we'd recommend that the full amount be funded. Between the program income and the allocation from the entitlement program, you'd have approximately $85,242. Of that would be that $52,250 that would have to be done for the fair housing and suggested for the HMIS contribution, which would leave approximately $32,992 available for public services. And when you take out the public services and planning administration, between program income and your entitlement funds, you'd have approximately $369,380 available for allocation.
I think one of the benefits of having you come early is to save a lot of our nonprofits a lot of time and trouble kind of going after funding. I don't want to prejudge any projects, but the fact that we're going to have maybe $30,000, and knowing that this council has always, always, always supported senior nutrition.
That's right.
And housing. And so if you have people coming to your workshops and they're going to commit 10, 15, 20 hours putting together an application for some kind of leadership training, it's probably not going to be funded under this program. I don't want to prejudge anything, but their time may be better spent
Yep. It's a-
looking to get funding from Library and Community
Yeah.
Services,
It's an excellent
Friends of the
point.
Library. Okay?
We could also, we do, it is available public-wide, and we do make this, the council's direction known in the RFP
Okay.
process. I think we can anticipate an application from Ms. Solorio, and I would also put it to you, through the council, that in discussing earlier all the Parks and Recreation projects, you could also consider an application from, for public services to supplement some of your parks projects.
It's not going to come out of public services. I will
Yeah,
tell you that. I mean,
that
public.
would mean that much less money
Yeah,
you'd have
no.
available. but-
Public facilities and infrastructure, absolutely. So figure out from the Measure P funding how best to leverage Measure P and maybe some CDBG funding along with any grant opportunities. But again, I think under public services, we're going to be looking at basic services of food and shelter. I think we all have voiced very strongly our support of code enforcement efforts. So whatever funding can be allocated for code enforcement would be probably money that would be looked upon favorably. Any other things with regard to guidance so that we kind of streamline the process a little bit?
I think you make an excellent point, Mayor, just establishing priorities on senior nutrition and homelessness. I think it's great and it's fair, so that they don't make the investment.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have additional slides?
No, I don't. I do know the
Okay.
only other interest so far from
Yes.
the city departments that I know engineering's looking at requesting some funding for sidewalks.
Yeah.
They have not received any sidewalks funding since, I believe, the 15-16 year.
Okay.
So I do believe they're going to be submitting an application also.
Okay.
So unless you have any other projects that you'd like to see staff pursue.
Parks and sidewalks are traditionally the ones that we've funded.
Okay, see
Well,
mine?
that, and I think we added a spa to the city manager's office.
There's a bar in there.
The bar?
Bar.
A wet bar?
That's in
No.
the city attorney's office.
Okay, so, is that good enough?
That's good
We're
enough
good?
for me.
Okay, and
And
that
mine was
was
short and sweet. I just want to say mine was short and sweet.
the
so.
direction and recommendations. Okay, item number 11, Ms. Villacana, this is repeal and reenactment of Chapter 7 of the City Code.
Good evening. I'll try to make this quick. This item before you is just an update to our codes related to building. As you can see from the staff report, there's multiple codes that the building department goes by and requires from the projects. So the last update we did was back in 2014, I believe. So this is just an update to our municipal code to comply with the latest amendments and updates to all these codes that are within within the staff report.
Okay, are there any questions with regard to the updating of this item?
Just, Ms. Villacana, just curious, what triggered this? Was it legal, or was this come through an LSR, or?
Well, every so often, the state,
Okay.
the building code gets updated, the electrical code and the other codes. So we want to be in compliance with the state codes, with regulations.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, if there's no other questions, then I'd ask for a motion to approve item number 11, which is approval of ordinance number 18-11.
11.
I think it's electronic.
Ooh, we have a little bit of a glitch here, Diane. Do you want to, my screen is totally black now.
Technical difficulties.
Oh, there we go.
Did it go back?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm good, and Mr. Jackson can abstain on this one. Okay, that item passes 4 with 1 abstention. We'll move on then to item number 12, which is amending Chapter 2, Article 4 of the City Code. Ms. Martin, is this part of your diligent move through our
Yes,
ordinances.
ma'am, although it was put on hold while we were finishing bargaining, so we're getting back to it now.
Okay.
The fire code should be coming, the fire department has provided it, and we're putting it in final form. The main change to this ordinance, I reviewed this ordinance with the finance officer as to the financial provisions, and she agrees that they're up to date and where they were not, as in some underutilized and unutilized funds, those sections were removed. The main change is to the surplus property provisions. This ordinance does two things that the city needed in its authorization. Number one, it allows online auction of surplus city property, which apparently is the way that things are now done and has been very successful for both police department and public works. And number two, it allows items to be donated with the authorization of the council over a certain amount of money or the authorization of the city manager for materials under $10,000. You previously did not have the ability to donate to a 501c3. I think that came up at a meeting not too long ago. So this provision has been reviewed by the manager and finance officer and public works and is acceptable to them.
Now, as we're updating these ordinances, how quickly are they being updated on our website?
The ones that we did 2 or 3 months ago are already in the code.
Very good. Okay, do we have any questions with regard to item number 12?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any other questions?
There's a section of the code that does have recently adopted ordinances when you look at the face of it, and it gets up there within a week or so.
Yeah, but if this is, what I'm looking at though is if we are updating our provisions, we don't want to be looking at two different places as to what the most recent revisions are. So what I'm asking is, in their totality, as they're being revised, when do we plug in, for example, the modifications to section 2.182? So that you're not checking two different documents.
30 days after the second reading is the soonest, so as soon as they'll put it into the next ordinance draft.
Very good. Okay, so this is approval of ordinance number 18-12. Any additional questions? Okay, let's ballot, please, on item number 12. And that item passes 5-0. Okay, we're going to move on then to a series of resolutions having to do with establishing the terms and conditions of employment. Item number 13 is terms and conditions of employment for unrepresented fire safety management employees. Item 14 is terms and conditions of employment for unrepresented police management employees. 16 is El Centro Police Officers Association. That was 15. 16 is certified water distribution operators, and 17 is Fire Chief Director of Disaster Services. So, starting with item number 13, current state law requires that before we consider city council action on salary and benefits for any executive managers, the city must provide an oral summary of the action to be considered. Items 13, 14, and 17 are resolutions that provide for the salaries and benefits for the unrepresented fire safety management, unrepresented police management, and the fire chief. For the unrepresented fire safety management employees, the resolution provides for a 5% increase on July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2019, a 4% increase for the second year of the term, and eligibility for step increase during the final 18 months of the term, and benefit increases provided to all employees, including cash out of annual leave, an increased city contribution to health insurance, and increased life insurance. And that item passes 5-0. Item number 14, for the unrepresented police management employees, the resolution provides for a 5% increase for the July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2019. Or June, what done that? A 5% increase for the second year of the term, and eligibility for step increase during the final 18 months of the term, and benefit as well as an increased educational incentive, and increases provided to all employees, including cash out of annual leave, and increased city contribution to health insurance, and increased life insurance. That item passes 5-0. Item number 15, I don't have anything to read.
It's not applicable.
Very good, then we can just vote on item 15. Yeah. That item passes 5-0. I said this before in case anybody wasn't here, but we've been through these contracts for like the last 8 months, so we're,
Seems like longer.
it seems like longer. Okay, item number 16, nothing to read. This is the certified water distribution operators. And that item passes 5-0. Item number 17, for the Fire Chief Director of Disaster Services, a salary increase of 4% effective July 3, 2018. No increase in the second year of the term, and an additional salary increase of 3.5% effective July 7, 2020. And benefits provided to all employees for an increased city contribution to health insurance, increased life insurance, cash out of leave, and payment for extraordinary duties as required by Resolution 15-72, applicable only to fire. And item 17 passes 5-0. Okay. Yay! Okay, now we are totally done, right, Terry, with all employee-related MOUs. Yay! Woo. All righty. And we're stable till, for like
2021.
3.5 years.
3.5 years. Congratulations. I know poor Ms. Salcido is wondering how we pay for all of that, but, I know.
She's the one that needs the bar in her office.
She needs the bar in her office. Okay. Legislative action, nothing to report at this time.
I think we'll probably have a legislative update coming in as you see a variety of ordinances at the next couple of council meetings.
I sat in on an excellent presentation today. I'm a member of the SCAG Legislative Committee, and we had our chief lobbyist from Sacramento, as well as the executive director of CalCog, weigh in on what they think the new administration under Gavin Newsom is going to bring to the table with regard to areas of focus. And I get that summarized. I will provide that to all of you because it was very interesting. Everything from where we think he'll go on water issues to housing to pensions, the Twin Tunnel project, all of it. So it's very interesting. Okay, we have 2 informational items, no business under successor agency, no public comments. Tax member.
Yeah.
from-
I'll just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I have no other comments, but guys, a lot to be thankful in our city. Thank you guys for everything. Be safe and enjoy the time with your family and friends.
Mr. Jackson.
Couple things. It was, obviously, some of us, the mayor, myself, and Pro Tem attended the National League of Cities in Los Angeles. Some good stuff on homelessness and cannabis. I think those were some of the big topics that at least we were kind of all concerned with. Attended the IBDC dinner up in Brawley. It was well attended. I think the Pro Tem was also in attendance, as well as the city manager. Presented proclamations for 2 of our local Eagle Scouts. Great ceremony. 2 very good young men that very deserving of the award of Eagle Scout. Attended Roy Durante's movie premiere over in Calexico. It was pretty well attended, and good to see a local guy do a local film. And then this Sunday had the very, very exciting to put together 150 care packages for the National Guard deployment from El Centro, or Imperial Valley, I guess I should say. We had just a ton of people come and volunteer. We put together 150 care packages in about 30 minutes with about 28 items in each box, plus letters from 4th graders, Christmas cards from 4th graders. And it was just a really nice deal. And so raised a lot of money for that cause, and we're also going to be doing a welcome home next summer when that deployment returns back to El Centro.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Sorry I couldn't make it on Sunday. That was Awesome. Mr.
I attended the National League of Cities with my colleagues. They were very, very informative instructional sessions. I think one of the highlights was watching the documentary and speaking to the mayor and chief of fire from Huntington, West Virginia, regarding their heroin epidemic, and seeing how the similarities between our cities in terms of demographic, in terms of population, and how they've been dealing with it. It was very eye-opening. Also, the other instructional sessions were very illuminating. Los Angeles is dealing with a lot of problems that we're seeing here, and on a much larger scale. So it's interesting to see how everybody's kind of pulling together, and of course, the tragedy that happened in Thousand Oaks that took everybody by surprise, especially because it happened right on the middle of the conference, and it was just great to see everybody come together. Also attended the Ivy EDC dinner. It was a very nice event. We look forward to them continuing to be partners with the county, including our city. So hopefully we can bring in some new businesses here. And it's very promising because they've been contacted, and apparently El Centro has been targeted several times. I got a call today. We have a meeting next week about somebody who's interested in bringing a very large corporate operation out here, and they want to have headquarters in El Centro. So that's something that's very exciting and something that I'll be working on as well with my colleagues to bring them out here.
Thank you.
Mr. Silva.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I think all of the council, our council will join me in congratulating you on your reelection.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Well,
you,
I mean,
sir.
there's still votes out there to be counted, right? But
Oh, it's not, well, I
It's
think
not official,
but it's.
But thank
okay,
you.
so it's an early congratulations.
There we go,
on
thank
that.
you.
I'm gonna, not necessarily council, but maybe PSA. I'd like to ask the council to save on your calendar May 3rd of 2019. That has been established as our next Dancing with the Stars Gala day. I'm going to read out to you the number of people that have been already confirmed. There's still 2 seats that we're waiting on confirmation, but confirmed are Danny Wharton, Valley Council Member, I guess Mayor Pro Tem, Victor Lopez, who is a trustee for Imperial Unified School District, Dixie Krim, IVC, Karina Alvarez, trustee for McCabe School District. I don't remember her name. She's a school teacher in Calexico, and she was highlighted a couple of months ago. She won some kind of major bodybuilding event in Mexicali, and so we've asked her to participate, and she also participated. Our newest star that has agreed to participate this year's event is our own Marcela Piedra.
Oh, my.
So she'll join a distinguished list of Dancing with the Stars alumni
That's true.
here in the council, so.
That's awesome.
You know what,
Trust
I
me,
bet the
your
city of
shoes are
Phoenix-
not that big to fill. After my performance, you'll be fine.
I bet we have the largest contingent of Dancing with the Stars
Probably so.
alums, huh?
Yeah, probably so.
Oh, easily, yeah.
Yeah. I think Diane Caldwell would be an
yeah.
excellent
Betsy.
participant.
I think Betsy.
All right. So,
That's okay, either did I.
Yeah.
anything else, Mr. Silva? Okay, so the morning after the election, I actually got on a plane at like 5:40 in the morning and flew to Los Angeles for the League of Cities. And I think that in addition to several presentations on homelessness, I took a field trip for both police and fire, and had a lot of really interesting information that was shared there. So much of their response time and resources have to be based on data-driven decisions, because the first thing the police chief said when he got up is, we're really, really short of officers, and we're having a hard time recruiting enough folks. And so we have to be making data-driven decisions on where we deploy our resources. So there's a lot happening in that space. A lot of things on homelessness. There was a really good presentation on recycling and some of the changes that are coming about as a result of China no longer being willing to accept recycling, which they have done for a gazillion years, and now to kind of just shut that down. But I think the most exciting part of that was really on the data opportunities. And I've been appointed to a SCAG committee that is looking at big data, open data, and to help cities like ours throughout the SCAG region pull together all of that and make it usable. So, and I brought some information home from the conference as well to share with you, Marcelo, when I get back. So then on Friday, so the conference, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, then I left to go to China for a week. I was there.
Or where?
What?
Chinatown?
No, we were in
Yeah, Chinatown. I went to Chinatown for a week. Actually, I was part of a California contingent with the state treasurer that we went to participate in looking at some sister city. Part of it was a sister city conference, but also just kind of have some boots on the ground with regard to what's happening in terms of the tariffs and the trade wars and everything else. It's a big deal.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then later this month, I will be attending the League of California Cities board meeting, which is scheduled for the end of the month. And that is it.
one thing.
Mr. Cardenas, we're gonna miss you.
I'm dealing with some separation anxiety, so.
Can we get you to change your mind and stay?
Yeah.
Please, oh, please. All right.
Just one thing. I think,
Yes.
we did celebrate, or just said that we accomplished all of our contracts.
Yes.
Kudos to Terry and
Yes.
to our city manager and our city attorney and all the staff that worked a lot of hours to get that done and take that off of our plates for the next
Yeah.
3.5 years. So thank you
Yeah.
very much.
So we don't have to adjourn to closed session today?
No,
All
but
right,
one of the things I would like, Terry, the city attorney, and the city manager to think about, I would really like an opportunity to meet just openly with the bargaining groups and just say, what went well in terms of negotiations? Where could we improve? What kind of information did you feel was very helpful in moving negotiations forward? Is there anything that we need to do to rebuild relationships? That's the part that just tears at me when we go through negotiations, is we kind of get into this us versus them mentality instead of us all being together as a team. So I would really like to do a debrief with staff, if they would be amenable to that, and kind of talk
I
about-
wanted to say that I think you should include the bargaining units in the compliments, because as we were working on this, we found them almost uniformly understanding, willing, and responsive, and frankly, pleasant to work with. I think they would welcome that opportunity.
Excellent. Okay, so maybe after the first of the year, we'll have a little agenda put together and figure out who we can invite. And
They like food, too.
I was going to say, serving refreshments is always good. Yeah.
Courtyard.
Yep. Okay. All right, we want to wish you all a very, very happy and safe Thanksgiving, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you.
Say bye-bye to Mr. Cardenas.